Here in the Pueblo Mountains, there are a number of species of Indian paintbrush, which is one of the most diverse plants as far as color goes. In one clump of Indian paintbrush, you can find pink, brilliant scarlet red, orange pink, white, green, yellow, and it's all paintbrush. They are a saprophytic plant, which means that they grow down, their root systems grow down, and they connect with the roots of host plants, like sagebrush, like creosote bush. They connect with those plants and they take the nutrients and the moisture that the roots of those larger woody shrubs collect. And that's how they live. Paintbrush looks day glow in some of its color forms. Brilliant pinks, brilliant reds, oranges, and they look so unnatural as far as their color goes. They are those colors because they are attracting pollinators. And pollinators land on them. They're fed on at night by moths that come in and nectar and feed on the pollen. And then they also are fed on by flies and native bees during the day. They're also fed on by caterpillars. Lots of different moths use paintbrush as a food plant. And so it's very important. And these are small little moths. And so frequently when you go to look at a paintbrush plant, you'll see little caterpillars on them. And those are the caterpillars feeding on the paintbrush. One thing that a lot of people do not know is that the brilliant colors of a paintbrush are not the flowers. Those are the leaves. The head of the paintbrush is all leaves, and the flowers are down inside that. And so the reds and the pinks and the oranges and the yellows, those are all part of the leaf. The more color that that plant produces, the more insects it attracts. And that's why. So from a distance of 50, 60, 70 feet, you can see a paintbrush plant. And that's what it wants. It intends for you to see it. Some other plants that we have come across in the Pueblos were evening primrose. We have found tiny dwarf primrose. We have found large desert primrose that's more than 3 inches across. The bloom is just beautiful. And they are rare and unusual, the giant primrose. And then we also found phlox, lots of species of phlox, but we found one specific species of phlox that is white, and it looks like a little bouquet on the ground. Very uncommon and unexpected in the Pueblos. Some other plants that we found are showy penstemon. This is a plant that has such a beautiful sapphire purple blue that you can't miss it, and either can the pollinators. So bumblebees, native bees, beetles, and ants all pollinate these penstemon. And penstemon are tube flowers that are about 1.25 inches long, but the color on them is just incredible. They are found in little clumps, and it's usually 1 or 2 stalks that are up, and they only grow about 10 inches, maybe 12 inches at most, but they are so brilliant. And insects, pollinators, when they see those plants, they see them totally different than we do as mammals. They see something completely different, and it attracts them very quickly. And so we see this beautiful sapphire blue. Who knows what they're seeing? But it's probably something along the same wavelengths that sapphire blue looks like to us, but they see something that's even more intense. And so it's pretty amazing. These penstemon grow in rocky, hot sites, and they bloom in May in the desert here, especially in the gullies and washes in the Pueblo Mountains. They bring out a lot of color, and it doesn't take very many showy penstemon to make a striking landscape. Also growing in the Pueblos is what's called snowball buckwheat. And this is a stem with a perfectly round whole group of white blossoms. And it's a buckwheat plant. And many, many small insects, including ants, flies, some moths, nectar on that buckwheat. But what it is most important to are a whole family of butterflies called little blues and also hair streaks. And they love buckwheat. And when these buckwheats are in full bloom, they honestly look like ping pong balls out there in the desert, and they attract a lot of insects. The interesting thing is, snow buckwheat grows in some of the most hot, dry sites, gullies, down in washes, where there's just rock everywhere and very little moisture. And yet they produce these beautiful flower heads and produce a lot of nectar. And I find that amazing because of the lack of moisture in those sites. The desert has many, many plants that have all kinds of relationships, and they have adapted to those situations very, very well. Another plant that grows in the arid interior of Oregon and Washington is Hooker's balsam root. And this is a beautiful, large flowered composite. It grows on very shallow, rocky lithosol sites. And lithosol simply means shallow soils with lots of rock. And Hooker's balsam root grows in the spring, in end of April into May, and it blooms just profusely. Oftentimes 3 or 4 great big 2.5, 2.25 inch wide blossoms. They are especially important to native pollinators, especially native bees, wasps, and hornets. And they pollinate on those big Hooker's blossoms. The Hooker's balsam root was named after a botanist in the 19th century from England. And he had all kinds of people collecting for him in North America. And they would send their botany collections back to England to him. And he was so well liked that many, many plants now maintain and hold the name of Hooker. And Mr. Hooker, Dr. Hooker, was well loved and well liked and very knowledgeable about North American plants. Scattered across the upper elevations of the Pueblo Mountains here is a beautiful onion, and it's called Brodia. It is a pale blue, and it grows on a long stem, and some of the stems can be 18 inches long, and with 3 or 4 flowers up on top of it. Brodia look artificial. They give a very, very strange look to them because they look like they're hollow, but yet they look constructed, and I don't know how to explain it, but they look like they're made of paper. Loads of native bees and bumblebees nectar on Brodia. And Brodia is an onion, belongs to the onion family. And it has a bulb underground about 4.5 inches. And they come up in the spring, usually in late April, early May, and they're just this beautiful, beautiful pale blue. The interesting thing is they never come up in big clumps. There's one Brodia here, one over there, one way back there. They never grow in big, thick mats of Brodia. So you find them scattered everywhere. Be on the lookout for Brodia when you're out in the desert, especially in the spring. They are amazing. And as spring advances up these mountains over the months, it reaches the 9,000 foot level in September, the 1st of September. And all these flowers that we're talking about now that are in the lower desert in the spring, in April and May, are just blooming in September at the top. So that's something to keep in mind, that if you miss them all summer long, you can ascend to the top of one of these desert peaks and there those flowers are just starting to bloom. So it's an amazing thing to witness. Another plant that is incredibly important in the desert is native fescue. They are beautiful. They have a purple inflorescence, a very tight form, and they grow in the hottest, driest portions of the Pueblo Mountains. The fescues are frequently fed on by ungulates, like deer. Some will be fed on by antelope. Lots of them get fed on by cattle. And so the fescues are very, very important because they're high nutrient level in the spring, and many ungulates depend on them. The other interesting thing is that fescues are pollinated by the wind, not by insects. And so when it blows their pollen to the next fescue downwind, and that's how they create their seeds. Lots of grasses are not pollinated by insects at all, and it's all wind pollination. So that's why when I look out here and see all this bunch grass, those are all wind pollinated. And it's very important for them not to have big trees or clumps of big tall brush. They need the low shrub step sage. And the wind blows through there and they get their pollen, and that allows them to produce seed. Native bunch grasses, of which the fescue is part of, are a very, very important family of grasses in the desert areas of the Pacific Northwest. They are invaluable, and they live for many, many, many years. Once established, many bunchgrass species continue to grow for 10, 15, 20 years, so very important. Today, we had the wonderful opportunity to go to the Diamond Craters, which are midway into the valley of the Donner and Blitzen River. The Diamond Craters are an area of amazing geologic formations. They are an area where a large volcanic lava flow occurred and then blew up. And there are great craters scattered all over the hillside and a large lava flow there. And in these craters are all kinds of plants and animals. And the interesting thing is how the craters were left after everything had happened. Many of them have perfectly flat bottoms in the center of them. And you can see where these craters have blown up and thrown all the material along the outside edge. It looks like meteors struck the earth, but no meteors did. The Diamond Craters is an area that was used by NASA to train astronauts for the Apollo missions. They got to learn to walk on ash in cinder. That's what they thought the moon was going to be like. So they came out and did all kinds of exercises and ran their vehicles out there and just worked on the Diamond Craters. Diamond Craters are an area that when it did blow up, it produced large numbers of small little lava bombs, and they're scattered all over. And as they fell back to earth from being exploded out of the earth, they started to harden on the outside, but they're still molten in the middle. And when they hit the ground, they look just like hot wax hit the ground. And they're scattered all over the Diamond Craters. The Diamond Craters also produce something else, and that is a large variety of native wildflowers. And they bloom from early March clear through to mid-September. So it's really amazing. The other interesting thing about the Diamond Craters is, from a distance, it does not look like much. But when you get up there, it is truly something to see. The other interesting place that we visited today was the French Round Barn, which is just off of the center area of Malheur National Wildlife Refuge. The French Round Barn was built in 1879, 1880 by Peter French, who was a rancher. He was the first rancher to bring white-faced cattle up into Oregon, and he had this massive round barn built so that he could break horses in the winter. And it is truly an amazing structure. So today, as we walked inside, here was a pair of great horned owls and a chick on a nest in the center of the barn. So that was interesting. Serious weather today there. It was snowing. It is May 22nd, 2020, and to have snow falling on us on May 22nd was kind of unusual. One other thing about the French Round Barn is that it is on the National Record of Historic Sites, and it is truly an amazing place to visit. The design, the materials used were native, huge western juniper trees, and they are absolutely beautiful. The next place that we visited was Malheur National Wildlife Refuge Headquarters, and it is an oasis. It has large trees all the way around it and is well known all over the country for its amazing number and diversity of bird species, especially migrants that come into that area. Many of these migrants do not nest there, they are passing through. But because of the large number of trees and the large number of insects, many birds make it a point to stop at Malheur National Wildlife Refuge. The U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service has made it a point to make it very birder friendly. And if you're a photographer or a birder or just enjoy being out in the natural world, it's the place to be. It is truly amazing in late May, early June. Today, however, it was snowing off and on. And so we had sunshine and then snow. And that's what happens when you're at 4,200 feet above sea level. And that's where Malheur Refuge sits. Malheur Refuge is a famous place because it was first found by Peter Skeen Ogden and a party of German explorers who, when they arrived in the area, got caught in a massive lightning and thunderstorm. And they named the river that flows into the lake, into Malheur Lake, they named it Donner and Blitzen, otherwise lightning and thunder. It is a weather unpredictable area, and you never know what you're going to get. I used to live in Burns, and I saw it snow in the Harney Valley every single month of the year. So that's what happened. But it is a wildlife mecca, huge numbers of birds, large numbers of wild animals. The reason that we were traveling through the Malheur area coming up from Fields Oasis was because of the vast wetlands and a specific bird species that gathers there in large numbers, and that is the white-faced ibis. These ibis are absolutely resplendent. They have a rust red purple body. Their primary or their flight feathers are green, iridescent green. And when they close their wings, their scapulars have blue, green, and red in them. And they are an absolutely beautiful bird. They have a long, decurved bill, which they use to probe into the mud in the wetlands to eat worms and other invertebrates. This area, especially around Diamond, concentrates hundreds and hundreds of white-faced ibis. They even nest in the area. This year, White-faced ibis have not only congregated there, but they have moved further north into eastern Washington in large numbers as well. A native mammal that lives out here in the Pueblo Mountain region, we are in the territory of many, many dozens of black-tailed jackrabbits. This is an incredibly interesting animal because jackrabbits are the primary staple food for many predators, from golden eagles and coyotes, kit foxes, bobcats, cougars, all are in the Pueblos. And we are on the eastern slope of the Pueblo Mountains right now, and the jackrabbit population does something that is very interesting, and that is it has about a 7 or 8 year rotation cycle. And that means that at the top of its cycle, jackrabbits are everywhere. Thousands and thousands of them. There are probably a couple hundred for every square mile. And then it crashes. And what happens is a plague hits. And their numbers just plummet down to the bare minimum, where you could walk for miles through this shrub steppe and never find a single jackrabbit. But there's enough there to start to build that population back up. And what happens is, when the population crashes, the predators that depend on those jackrabbit populations also start to crash because they just don't have enough prey to feed on. So we have been very fortunate the last couple days here in the Pueblo Mountains to find some jackrabbits. So they are starting to build up a little bit, but they're not common by any means. Black-tailed jackrabbits are one of several species of jackrabbits in the western United States. The other one is a white-tailed jackrabbit, which we have not seen and does not live right here. Black-tailed jackrabbits are extremely common in the northern Great Basin when they're here in numbers at the top of their cycle, their population cycle. Black-tailed jackrabbits create trails or highways that they travel, and that allows them to cover their territories very rapidly because they have these roadways that they just run down. They're very fast. However, one of their predators has learned to deal with their speed, and that is the coyote. Coyotes know how to hunt jackrabbits. And because jackrabbits are one of their primary prey, they will take after them. And they will chase them in a circle. And as jackrabbits start to run in circles, coyotes will take after them. One coyote will take after the jackrabbit, and the other coyote will cut across the circle and catch them head on. So jackrabbits are predictable in how they try to evade predators. They either take off in a straight line, in which case they get met by the predator, or they try to run in a big circle, in which case the coyote cuts them off. Golden eagles depend on jackrabbits for food, and golden eagles are very good at hunting jackrabbits. However, jackrabbits have learned that golden eagles cannot come after them when they run under the barbed wire of a fence. And more than one golden eagle has ended up injuring itself or dead by striking barbed wire fences that a jackrabbit ran under. So jackrabbits too have altered their behavior in their quest to survive by using barbed wire fences. The other thing about jackrabbits is they do not dig warrens or holes, and they are a hare, and they will always have somewhere to hide under a thick sagebrush or a big creosote bush, and they will tuck back in there and they will eat and feed on whatever plants they can find and watch their territory. And they always have powerful, powerful scent. They can smell anything that's coming down the trail, but their greatest asset are their huge ears. And that's why they're called jackrabbits. They have long ears and they are super sensitive, and they have hairs in them that allow the animal to pick up the slightest abnormal sound. So they can hear footfalls with a coyote or a cougar or a bobcat. they can hear that. They can feel vibrations through the pads of their feet on the ground. They can hear humans coming a long, long ways off. They hear cattle coming and deer and whatever else is moving across the landscape. Jackrabbits pick it up through their feet and they can hear it. So they are wired for sound and vibrations, and that allows them to survive. Jackrabbits do incredibly well in highly arid sites because they only need the water they get from plants. And that allows them to produce enough moisture and water that they don't have to go down and find a pool to drink from. If they do find a pool, they will drink from it, but they're not dependent on that water. If there's a major drought, their population simply drops low, and the few remaining animals will feed on the plants that are remaining. And if everything dies out, they go with it. So remember that jackrabbits have very large population swings because of the cycle of their populations. And so at times they're here in massive numbers and other times virtually none. So that's natural.